So, today we're going to talk about, in the form of leadership, do leaders always know? Do they always have the answer? And really what we want to talk about is navigating uncertainty. When you don't know the answers, when you don't have the answers, when you don't know what to do next, we're going to talk about how do you do that, especially as a leader. And remember, when we say as a leader, some of us, we automatically count ourselves out because we don't count ourselves to be leaders. And if you remember 2 weeks ago when we first started this, we believe every single person was designed by God to be a leader. You are a leader. In some area of your life, you are a leader, even if, regardless of what it is. I don't want to make one thing sound more important than another, but we are all leaders in the area that you have function in. You are a leader. And we've been talking about developing next generational leaders, which means that we will include every single age group as far as leadership, where you can learn some leadership skills, where we can teach leadership skills even to those who are younger, and where we can allow them to even lead us. I was thinking about something as I was talking. I don't remember who I was talking to about it, but I didn't think about it in this sense before when I've shared this. But when I was 12 years old, living with my grandfather, who was, my greatest mentor of life, and he was a pastor, and I was in my early teens, 12 years old, 11, 12, 13, and when I was about 12 years old, I remember the first time somebody that was teaching Sunday school didn't show up, and I got nominated to teach Sunday school. So at 12 years old, I was teaching adult Sunday school. And they all listened. And wherever I made a mistake, they corrected me. But I was the Sunday school teacher. And too many times, as we've grown up and we've kind of grown away from that, we allow children to have their children's church and we do our thing. But there are times when we need to realize that every person has some leadership on the inside of them, and we need to give them that space to allow them to be able to express that. Every different age group. I was also at a block club picnic yesterday. I had so much fun. And one of the games that we were playing, and I chose to play along with them, although I was the guest, but I chose to play along with them. And I don't even know the name of this game, but there are 6 people on each team, and they had 4 adults and 2 kids on each team. But each team had to figure out how to win. And we were just spelling words, and you had to get up. Every person had a letter, so I don't know what the name. Some of you probably recognize this game. Each person had a letter, and the letter, whatever the solution to the question was, we had to be able to spell it and get in the right position so that that word is spelled for the audience. And on our team, we had an 80-year-old, and we had like a 9-year-old. And a bunch of people in the middle. But we all had to figure out how to work together to win. And our team was winning up until we had the other team down 9-5. And they were ready to give up, actually. They were ready to give up. They were saying, okay, we can't win. Because we had just pounded those 9 points up, boom, 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 boom. But we weren't figuring out how to overcome some of the things that were coming at us. And we got stuck. And that next team made the next 6 points straight in a row and won. But it was a great lesson for each one of us. And I remember I had the letter on my card, the letter T, and on the other side was the letter E. And I was pretty much I was leading our team, because whatever the word was, and I said, okay, I need you here. And a couple of times, what we needed was the letter I had, and I'm up saying, where's the E? Who has the E? Who has the E? And it was me. And you got to get in your spot and sit down before the other team does with the same letter in order to win. And near the end, the 2 youngest people on the team, they looked like they were about 8 and 10. I don't know how old they all were. Each one said separately to me, as I was sitting next to them at different points in the team, you're sitting next to different people, and they kind of elbowed me and said, what we really have to learn to do is know what our own letter is. So we need some leadership from all the different age groups, and then everything about computers, they look to the younger people for. But any questions, but that's why you need everybody. We had a flavor of everything on our team. And so we all have to work together. And remember this picture that I showed you a couple of weeks ago, that all the different parts of a car, where there's some 30,000 different parts of a car, and we asked the question, which one is the most important? As being most important, we mean like, which part of the car is the leader? What part is the leader? There is no certain part of the leader, and that's what we learned. No one is the leader, and then at the same time, everyone is the leader. And that's the way it is in life. No one person is really the leader, but everyone is the leader. There may be a point person that's the leader and where everyone else look to, but everyone is a leader in their area of function. And so if your function, whatever you have authority in, whatever you have the ability to do, then you need to learn and get your skill together so that you can be a leader in that area. And then once you become a leader in that area, last week we talked about mindset. And remember last week when we talked about this, we said your set of beliefs about yourself. You, what do you believe about you? It's all about yourself, what I believe about me, including my intelligence, my personality, everything about me, whatever gifts I have, whatever abilities I have, that's my mindset. And so the goal last week was to get each of us to realize that we have a growth mindset, not something that's set in stone and that's you forever. Even when we think about an IQ test tests you for where you are at that particular time. It really was designed for kids at the time so that they could figure out what kids needed, certain things. But sometimes we look at an IQ test and we look at that score and say, that's my IQ forever. No, it's not. You don't have a fixed mindset. You have a growth mindset. So you're able to grow. You're able to move forward. You're able to move from where you are. You're not stuck into whatever your abilities you have. You can hone your skill. You can get better at whatever you're doing. And that's one of the big problems that we have a lot of times, is that whatever we have some kind of gift in doing that we're really good at, then we don't study in that area so that we can get better. You really can do it with more ease than almost anybody else, but if you also learn some skill in that area, you would find yourself way ahead of everybody else, and you would totally be the leader in that area. But with every leader, regardless to what area you're in, we're going to run into a period of time when you don't have the answers, when you don't know what to do next, and when you're the leader, everybody else is looking to you as to what to do, right? Anybody ever been there? Even if it's just parenting at home, and there's a situation, and you don't know what to do, but the parent has to know what to do. The kids are looking to the parents as to what do we do next? What's happening next? I'm thinking of a situation when we were kids, and we were living out in the country in the middle of nowhere, and there was a storm. Until this day, I don't know if it was a tornado or whatever, but our neighbor's house got blown off the blocks. We remember those houses down there, they were sitting on blocks. Our neighbor's house got blown off the blocks. Ours did get blown off the block, but the doors wouldn't stay shut. However, I remember seeing my dad at the door trying to hold the door shut, and my sisters trying to help, and really we were kind of getting in the way. And so they had to kind of tell us what to do in the middle of a situation where you really almost don't have time to tell somebody. That's not the time when you can really be nice and say, I need you to go sit over here, Johnny. It's like, sit down right there, you right there, you right there. And you got to just do it. And sometimes it takes those kind of leadership. But when you don't know what to do, how do you navigate your uncertainties? How do you make the difference? How do you know what to do when you don't know what to do? You know what I'm saying? How is it that you know what you need to do? If we go back to what Colin Powell was saying, and I'll put some of this on the screen. Remember, he said it's not as bad as you think. That's the attitude he wants to give everybody. that's in leadership in the Army is they have to have this attitude, it's not as bad as they think. It will be better in the morning. So they have to think about this all the time, no matter how bad it is. And I've spoken to some of these people who've done, great jobs for us, and my hat's off, and I honor and salute every single person that's been involved in military in any sense of the way. But to think that no matter how bad it is, you have to think, it's not as bad as I think. It's not as bad as I think. And it's going to get better in the morning. And one of the things that he's saying is, even though you have to think like that, it may not be better in the morning, but every day you got to think, it's going to be better in the morning. It's going to be better in the morning. It's got to be better in the morning. And then he goes on to say, this is not a prediction, it's an attitude. So you're not predicting that it's going to be better. It's an attitude that you go to bed with, that you create some peace with, that you're able to sleep because you believe it's going to be better in the morning. So that's what you go to bed with. Things are going to be better in the morning. And here's what I believe. If you are a leader, you must believe it will be better in the morning. You got to believe it. It's not that you're just saying this. You got to believe that it's going to be better. Tomorrow will be better than today. And where does that energy come from when you say, I believe it will be better in the morning? Where does that energy come from? Where do you get the confidence to think and know that it really will be better in the morning? So here's one of my questions for you. How do leaders handle fear and uncertainty? And that's really what uncertainty is. It's one of the types of fear. So I'm going to list some fears for you, at least 8 of our greatest fears. Many times you've heard people say, many people, their greatest fear is the fear of speaking in front of people. And that's like the greatest fear. Some people have this fear of dying, a great fear. No matter what happens, they're always looking like the worst thing is about to happen, fear of dying. Or the third one here is uncertainty, and we're going to focus in on that one because many of the other ones are included even in this one. Failure, just the fear of failure is another one. Fear of rejection. Anyone ever been rejected? Fear that she may reject you, or he may reject you, or they may reject you. Fear of change. Fear of things being different. I mean, we get comfortable with the way things are. How many of you, that's kind of your style? You like it like it is, and don't nobody change nothing. If we can keep it just like this, we're going to be fine. But then the minute something changes, you're like, oh, man, And so we have to learn how to navigate change because that's one thing that's constant, and that's change. And so another fear is the fear of missing out. We're just afraid we're going to miss something. Some of us have that fear so great, especially, you can see this in all different age groups, but a kid that has this kind of fear, that's why they can't go to sleep at night. They just scared they're going to miss something. They got to be awake. They got to be part of everything. And the last one there that I'm going to mention, there are a lot of number of fears, but the last one I'll mention there is the fear of being judged by others. And so you make decisions just so that you're not judged by others. You allow that fear to control you. And that's what happens in any of these areas where we allow the fear to control us. If I'm afraid of speaking, then I don't do my best. If I am in front of some people, I'm so afraid that I can't focus on whatever I'm talking about or the people that I'm talking to, which one of the greatest things you can think about in the area of speaking is to have in your heart what you're delivering to the people and what they're receiving bigger than whatever you think you're sharing. People need what I'm saying, and if we can just get what I'm saying, the concept there, that's one way you can overcome your fear, because every single Sunday morning that I stand up here, when I get started, there's an initial fear. I have to lock into what I am delivering, what I'm saying to you. So there's a way to get past every single fear. But here's what fear is not, and this is not what we're talking about today, hiding your fear. Sometimes we want to appear not to be afraid. We want people, and that's really not what Colin Powell was saying either. Remember, he also said that when everybody else is cold, you're the leader, you can't be cold. When everybody else is scared, you're the leader, you can't be scared. It's not that you're just hiding that. you have to see yourself, you have to get something from somewhere that enables you to overcome that within yourself. I'm not just refusing to show fear, that I have fear, but I'm just not going to show it, and I'm hiding it. That's called pretending. When you pretend that you have all the answers and you really don't have all the answers, you're a disaster. When people think that you know, and you just be pretending all this time and you really don't know nothing. Anybody know anybody like that? Yeah. And so we don't want to allow fear to actually control the decisions that we make. But there is a good thing about fear, and we need to realize that. Fear is designed for us. Fear is for a purpose. The purpose of fear is to make us take some kind of action. It's like you need to do something. It's not, you may have to think first, but you need to do something. When fear comes, you need to do something. In other words, either you're trying to avoid something or something you need to avoid. I mean, think about it. Some of the things that even we looked at, the kind of fear that just startles us. If a car horn blows, anything, noise, big noise, it gets your attention. There are certain parts of the brain that go to work right away when any of those stimulus come into our being. That stimulus happen, your muscles tense up. You're much more alert. You can be sleepy. Anybody ever almost fallen asleep driving? And you wake yourself up and that scared you so bad, you are wide awake for the rest of the trip. So fear has its purpose. And the other thing is that fear is the result of something. If I could say it that way, fear is a byproduct. It's the consequence of something. It's the consequence of the ability that we have, and that ability is to remember what we did in the past or what happened in the past, and also to project what could or may happen in the future. So fear is a connection of those two things. When I can remember what happened, and because I remember what happened, I'm projecting what could happen again. And if it's distasteful or if I don't want that to happen, then fear is that part that causes us to expect the worst. You've seen this before, then you expect the worst. You've seen it before, but there's something else that's the same kind of product as fear is. Fear is a consequence of the ability to remember and project. Remember the past and project the future. But think about this. Hope is also a byproduct. Hope is the consequence of remembering the past and projecting the future. If I have some kind of hope, it's because something is painted in my mind based on what I've experienced before. And here's where we have to learn how to get a brand new picture in our mind other than what we've experienced in the past. If you want a new hope, you got to get a picture from someplace else other than your past, or you never could be different. So if we're going to outgrow our past, if we're going to be different than our past, then we got to get a picture from somewhere else in our mind in order to project that into our future so that we can actually get past the past and actually use hope instead of allowing fear to keep us stuck in the past. Now, when we look at what Jesus said about fear, it seems like it's not a lot of help. Because what did Jesus say? When you think about anything about fear, what did Jesus say? What did he say? He said, fear not. So how do you do that? How do you just not be scared? Because you can't just not be scared, because fear remember, it's a product of what you're remembering and what you're projecting. So how do you not remember and say the same thing could happen again? How do you get there? So we want to look at some things that Jesus said and help us to refocus our own past, or at least refocus from the past to the future, whatever we're projecting in the future, so that we can have a different kind of outcome. And we're talking about leadership here, but remember, you are a leader regardless to, even if you're 9 years old today and you're listening to me, you are a leader. My 5-year-old granddaughter is a leader. When she comes over, she says, Papa, let's do this. Papa, let's do that. She's trying to lead me into doing different things. And if we're playing a game and if she starts losing, she'll change the rules. She says, okay, here's the rule. You got a leader there. That's someone who's, they're starting to direct things. And here's what Jesus said in the 10th chapter of Matthew. We'll look there first, where he says, do not be afraid of those who can kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Now that's very interesting. This is how he's starting to teach us about not being afraid and how to fear not. He says, don't be afraid of those who can kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Now, if you're one of those fears we talked about was the fear of dying, if you have any kind of fear of dying, what do you do with this scripture? It's like, do you just say, okay, they can just kill my body, I'm going to be fine? You don't think like that, do you? Well, at least I'll go to heaven. I'll be fine. Everybody will be fine. You just killed my body. It's kind of like what we used to say as kids. You know, sticks and stones might hurt, break my bones, but words never hurt. But words really do hurt. We grew up to realize that words hurt. And the same way it is when we just say, don't be afraid of those who can kill the body but can't kill the soul. If we just stayed right there, then that wouldn't make much sense. But he said, when Jesus continued on, he said, rather be afraid of the one. Now think about this. He said, don't be afraid of those who can kill the body but can't kill the soul, but rather fear or be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body. And this verse right here causes us to refocus our fear. It causes us to reproject the future based on what we remember from the past. And so here, when he's saying, rather be afraid of the one, instead, really what he's saying, don't be afraid of something that could happen, but create a healthy respect for the person who can control all of this. And that's what he's saying, rather be afraid of the one. The one there he's talking about is God, who can destroy both soul and body in hell. And then he starts to explain to us how God feels about this. He says, are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? And however much a bird is worth, I don't know. You know, two birds for a penny, that's pretty cheap, right? And especially back in that day. But he says, yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside of your Father's care. He's letting us know that as ridiculously unimportant as a bird is, and not any kind of bird, a sparrow, which, you know, who wants a sparrow for a pet? Nobody, right? But he says, yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside of your Father's care. So God cares, and that's really what he goes on to say. In the next verse, he says, even the hairs of your head are numbered. They are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. So let's get this whole concept together. He's saying, don't be afraid of the person that can kill just your body, but be afraid of the person or God who can actually kill both the body and the soul. So change your perspective to the person who controls everything. And even he brings it to the point where realizing that even a bird that you don't think is worth anything, God cares and knows about all of that. So he wants us to develop the kind of relationship with God, with himself, that we realize that he's in control of everything, and I need to just relax and submit myself to him, knowing that he cares about me. It may seem that he doesn't care, but he cares about me, and that's what Jesus is saying. Now here, we need to realize something that I think many of us in church, many of us in especially what I would call the faith movement, many of us, we are saying something that Jesus did not say. Let's look at what Jesus did not say. Jesus did not say, don't worry, nothing's going to happen. That's what we want him to say, right? Don't worry, whatever your fear is will never happen. And we've heard that before. Most fears that you fear will never happen anyway. And that may be true, but that's not what Jesus said. He didn't say, don't worry about it, nothing's going to happen. He said, don't fear the person that can kill the body, but fear the one who can kill both the body and the soul. And so I wanted to look at an example of someone here who made a difference when Jesus, and this was in the Old Testament, so I'm going to bring a character out of the Old Testament and apply these concepts that we're talking about. Remember last week we used Joshua as a character, and we talked about Joshua when he was preparing. He had followed up Moses. He was the leader after Moses. He didn't know necessarily how. For example, he had been mentored by Moses, and now in the first chapter of Joshua, he's the leader. And Moses has brought these people through the wilderness all the way, first of all, out of Egypt. He made that transition to get them out of the place where they were. Now they're in the wilderness, and before they go into the land that God had promised them, Moses is dealing with these people for almost 40 years. Excuse me. And Joshua and Caleb, the only two originals that left Egypt with Moses, are the only two from that original pack that actually made it into the promised land. And Joshua is here now, and in the beginning of that chapter it says, Moses, my servant, is dead. And God began to say some things to Joshua. I shared some of these scriptures with you last week, but here is where it begins. I believe we're in the 6th verse where we'll start, where he says, be strong and courageous, for you are the one who will lead these people to possess all the land that I swore to their ancestors. He's letting Joshua know, you're the leader. You are the leader. And he gives Joshua some instructions here. And he says, study this book that I've given you. Don't let it get out of your mouth. Always say whatever I'm saying. And that's really what God was saying, and that's what he's saying to us. If you will continue to say what I'm saying about you, where you can change your image of yourself, then you can have a different projection for your future. If you can begin to say and believe what I have already said about you, then you can personally change your own projection. Otherwise, you're projecting what you always remember, and you're remembering what actually happened. But you don't like what happened. If you don't like what happened, then you need to find something new so that you can project something new and you have a brand new experience. So what Joshua is saying here is study this book of the law continually and meditate on it day and night, which will actually change and refocus what you remember. Start to remember what I have promised. And then the next verse says, and only then will you prosper and succeed in all you do. Only then will you prosper. Only then will you move forward and do something different than what you've always had. You want something different. In order to get something different, you got to move forward and change and do something different. And then the 9th verse, he says this is the command. In other words, God is commanding him. He said, I'm commanding you to be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. There it is again. Do not be afraid or discouraged. And he gives him the reason that you shouldn't be afraid. And that is because the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Wherever you go, whatever you're doing, whatever your business is, wherever you find yourself, God is with me. That's what you're saying. God is with me. I am not alone. I'm not stuck in my own limitations. God is with me. I have resources that are unlimited. God is with me. So here's the day I want to move a little bit further than we did last week in this verse, because that's what God told Joshua. The very next verse tells us what Joshua did. Here's what Joshua did with what God said. So Joshua ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp and tell the people. In other words, he's telling every leader, he says, go through the camp and tell the people. He's getting ready to tell them what to say. But go through the camp of all the people and tell the people. Now think about this. Joshua if you look at it, in our day, Joshua is probably an older baby boomer. He's talking to people in Gen X and younger, people who are 40 years old and younger, because everybody that was 40 years older and older has died because God promised that they would not make it over there. So you're looking at Gen Xers, Gen Yers. These are the people who Joshua was talking to that are getting ready to go over this Jordan. So they hadn't experienced, many of them were babies when they came through the Red Sea. Some of them didn't see, some of them were born afterwards. They don't even know any of that experience. So they don't have all of that history. The only two people that have all of that history is Joshua and Caleb. They have some things to remember that were good, that they can project forward and say, like we sang the song this morning, he'll do it again. If we know he's done it before, then we know he can do it again. But many of these people hadn't seen him do it before. But look at what Joshua told them. He said, go through the camp and tell the people this. Get your provisions ready. 3 days from now, we will cross the Jordan. So the place where everyone's been so afraid to go, he just says, get your stuff together. In 3 days, we're going across the Jordan. They could have been saying, well, wait a minute, how are we going to get across the Jordan? I mean, there was all kinds of questions. Well, then what are we going to do? And we would all have some of those same questions. But he continued on. He said, 3 days we're going to go across the Jordan and, excuse me, and we're going to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God has given you for your own. He says, in 3 days, we're going across and we're going to take the land. In other words, he didn't say how, but he said in 3 days, we're going across and we're going to take the land that God has given us. He's putting together what God has promised, and he's saying, we're going to refocus everything that you remember from the past, we're going to refocus that into what God has promised. We're going to refocus and project in our future what God promised, not everything that we've experienced. Because some of these same kids, if they just thought about what their parents did, if you think about what your parents did and your parents didn't make it, then of course, how many of you have talked to some people and they can't see themselves being any better than their parents? You know, if that's what my dad did, that's what I'm going to do, and that's where we're stuck. That's what my mom did. That's the way we do it. But at the same time, Joshua says, we want to refocus here. And what he did is took their focus away from what they were afraid of and put their focus on who had made a promise to them. So take a look at this. So we want to refocus the what to the who. And that's what we have to do. Refocus what you're afraid of. Refocus what's been in the way. Refocus from the what and refocus to the who. When he said, be strong and courageous, don't be afraid, don't be discouraged. God is with me. God is with me. And that's the entire refocus. That's why he can say, be strong. He's not just telling you to grab yourself by your bootstraps and pick yourself up. I mean, you've heard people say that as if you have some kind of strength within yourself that you don't have in order to make it different. You don't. So what he's saying is be strong and courageous, but he's saying that with something at the end of this phrase. When he says don't be afraid, don't be discouraged, here's the reason. God is with me. So here's our challenge for this week. Your challenge is to acknowledge the source of your fear, whatever that something is. Acknowledge the source. In other words, you're not pretending. People who pretend, and especially leaders who pretend, they pretend to know everything, pretend that they think they have their own history that can make their future. Sometimes your future has demands on you that your past didn't prepare you for. And even if you are a leader that had a great past, doesn't mean that you're going to have a great future, because the future that's in front of you could demand a whole lot more than what you've ever gone through. So your challenge is to acknowledge the source of whatever that something is that's in front of you, and overwhelm that something with the someone who can do something about the fear that you have. That's really what Jesus said when he said, don't be afraid, don't be discouraged, God is with you. He's refocusing all of those things that you were afraid of, all of those things that's on your mind from your past, refocusing that to God who made a promise to you. And that's what we have to do. That's what you have to do. That's what every leader has to do. Even if you are a 5-year-old leader, we have to learn how to refocus our future on what God has promised that's bigger than whatever the fear is in front of us. So we have to learn to develop a healthy respect for God, a healthy respect for the someone, not the something. And that's really what Jesus was saying the whole time that he's talking about all of this. Don't be afraid of the person that can just kill the body, but be afraid of the person that can kill the body and the soul. Refocus on the someone that's bigger than everything, the someone that can change everything. You have a relationship with that someone. You have a connection with that someone. You can depend on that someone. Not that everything is going to go fine, not that everything is going to work out perfectly the way that you think it should and the way that you thought it would, and that you're not going to deal with any pain, you're not going to have any suffering. That's not what Jesus said. What he did say is this: I will be with you in it all. I will be there. So even if you're in the storms of life, things are happening in your life where maybe you're not looking to take possession of something new, but just things that are happening to you, storms in your life, different things that's coming up that's changing. Remember, people don't like change. When change comes, that's like a storm. It's like, okay. And remember, one real quick story where Jesus said, again, where he told his disciples not to fear. They were on their way across the sea, and Jesus was in the boat, and a storm arose. I didn't put the scripture up here for you, but this big storm arose. And James Cleveland wrote a song about it. How many of you remember that song? Peace be still. Where he said, Master, the tempest is raging. Anyway, the billows are tossing high. But that whole song is talking about that scripture where they're on the boat and where the disciples are on the boat and Jesus is asleep. And sometimes that's where we feel we are in our lives. It's like I'm in the middle of a storm and Jesus is sleeping. So they wake him up. They wake up Jesus and they say, Master, don't you care? We are perishing. So you see where they're focusing? They're on the boat. I don't know how big the boat was, but if it's within 10 feet, they're somewhere in the vicinity of Jesus who could control everything, and they're afraid that they're going to die with him on the boat. And they say to him, Master, don't you care that we perish? And what does he say? If you read the scripture, and I believe it's in the 8th chapter of Matthew, if you read the scripture, you'll see that it says, after Jesus got up. So he was still laying there listening to him, talk to him about this. They're telling him, don't you care if we're going to perish? And he said, where's your faith? You men are of such little faith, which sounds like a rebuke that, that was rough, because all they had to go by was whatever they've experienced before. These were fishermen. They've been on that boat many a times out in the sea. When a storm comes, we get off the sea. You leave. And here we are in the middle of the storm, middle of the ocean or the sea, and Jesus is saying, you have little faith? And it says, and then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves of the sea, and the sea became calm. And the next thing you read is where they said, these are the disciples now, where they said, what manner of man is this, that the winds and the sea obey him? And that's what Jesus is trying to bring our focus to. Whatever is going on in your life, if you focus on the who, not on the what, make that connection and keep that connection on the who, you can be ready for whatever comes in front of you because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know. There's no way you can be certain that everything is going to be the way you expected it to be. You have no way of knowing for certain what's going to happen tomorrow. But you know who holds tomorrow. And as long as you allow him to hold you and you trust him and not try and control it yourself, because you can't. But if you relax in him, then we can learn to do these things. We can learn to strive. Here's some action steps and growth thoughts. We can learn to thrive, not just survive. Sometimes we just want to make it. But we can learn to thrive in those kind of environments where we don't know what's going to happen. We can say, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm sure we'll figure it out. That's one way to say it. I'm sure we'll figure it out. I'm sure God is with us. We'll figure this out. God is with us. We'll get through this. I don't know what the end is going to be. I don't know what's coming in between, but I do know what God has promised. And so God is with us. We can learn to thrive in those kind of situations and not just focus on getting through it and surviving. See, fear is contagious. That's what's dangerous about fear. Fear is contagious. That's one reason that the leader has to overcome this within himself, because if you're the leader and you're afraid, everybody else is going to be afraid. So, and here's another thing, when you think about fear being contagious, you will take on the fear of those whom you hang out with. Whoever's around you, whatever they're afraid of, you'll start taking on that kind of fear, and you'll find yourself in that same environment where you're afraid of the same kinds of things. And so your goal is to hang out with those who are optimistic. Those who can look to God, replace whatever is in their past that has been terrible, and replace that with God's promise so that you can have something to focus on for the future that you can live into and expect to be different than what your past was. And so here's what you want to do is remember this, replace the something with the someone. Replace that something that you were afraid of, that something that's been in your way, that something that's creating storms in your life. Replace that something with the someone. And when your faith in that someone, when your faith in Jesus, that someone, when your faith in that person replaces your fear of that something, then fear loses its ability to control you. Until then, fear is controlling your actions. Fear is controlling your decisions. But when you can replace that something and you can have faith in Jesus, that someone, and when that faith replaces whatever that fear was, it's not that the fear is gone. See, that's the difference. Now you're still in the middle of the fear, but you have something bigger than the fear. So he's not saying, just stop being scared. That's not what he's saying. In the middle of being afraid, because that fear is bringing you away, making you aware of some dangers of changes that you need to make, you need to do something. You need to take some kind of action. But in the middle of that, replace that fear with the someone that can do something about it. And that's when you can overcome and allow that to control you into your future and not you be controlled by the things in your past. Amen. So God bless you. If you would just bow your heads, I'm going to pray, and I want to invite you today, if you are listening to me and any of this makes sense to you, even if you're not a Christian, and I mean, God has given us the gift, really fear is a gift. God has given us the gift of fear to take action, to make sure that we don't find ourselves in situations that we don't want to be in. But God has made a difference here. And I'm praying, Father, I pray today that you would bless those who are listening to this word, that you would cause that word to make sense in their hearts and their minds and their ability to see and allow you, the someone who can control those things, outside of my own power, outside of my own ability to do things, looking to you and resting in you, where I replace you, I move you into that place where fear has controlled me for so long in so many different areas, where I will allow you to have that control in my life and give you that place in Jesus' name. If you're listening to me today and you want to make a decision about any area of this that we're talking about, making a connection with God, making a connection with Jesus, or making a connection with Grace Transformational Ministries, you can let that be made known today. If you're here in Grand Blanc, you can meet us at our starting point table, and we'll have someone to give you some instructions from there. If you're on the internet and on the website, you can go to our website, gtmusa.org, and click on the Connect icon there, and then scroll down to the area where you can fill out some information and just tell us what your desires are, and we will follow up with you and make sure that you get what you need. So God bless you, and have a great day.